Welcome to part 3. We'll pick up at slide 47. The initial review of the rubric begins on slides 47 through 51 with the placemat consensus activity. This activity should be very familiar to you. If training face-to-face, you begin by modeling how to draw the circle template. Then you model with a volunteer from the audience how to populate the placemat using, let's say, for example, favorite pizza toppings. After everyone understands the instructions, then ask each table to populate their slice of the placemat with responses to the question shown here. When you walk out of a lesson that you deem to be effective, what were the elements that led you to that decision? Slide 48 that you see here gives the timings. You'll see a red arrow on the left pointing to the timings for each section. And, of course, the question. Leave this slide visible as they work. If you're training virtually, you can complete this activity using breakout rooms and have participants enter feedback on a Google form that you can refer to later, or have participants enter feedback in the chat box, and you capture repeated elements on a notepad for a brief debrief and for use after the gallery walk. After you have completed the placemat consensus activity, the next slide shares elements from other placemat consensus activities provided by NIET. These are on slides 50 and 51. This exercise begins to establish the point that there is a great deal of shared understanding of what good teaching looks like and sounds like. These foundational elements from other workshops further reinforce that the rubric highlights strong instructional practices. During the 3-day training, there are several recommended breaks in the morning and afternoon. Feel free to shorten the break if you're running short on time. The deep dive into the components of the rubric begins on slides 54 through 59. Notice at the top of this slide, there is a reminder for participants to turn to page 2 in the handbook. Slides 54 through 59 will highlight each element of the rubric, the domains, the indicators, the descriptors, and performance levels in slideshow mode. So be sure to click to make the arrows that point to rubric components visible as you explain each component. Be sure to emphasize that proficient is rock-solid teaching and that the rubric is not a checklist. The domains are the big buckets. The indicators are the areas to be examined. The descriptors define the indicators, and the performance levels help determine the overall evaluation ratings. When you get to slide 60, be sure to share the domain weights: planning at 20%, environment at 20%, professionalism at 10%, and instruction at 50%. The next step is to model how to complete the looks like, sounds like chart. As trainer, you will again model with the standards and objective indicator by charting the key words, determining how that indicator might materialize in the classroom, and then determining the essence words. Remember that the keywords in the first column are the keywords you highlighted in the rubric. After you model, face-to-face participants can work at their table on indicators you assign them, normally 1 or 2 indicators per table. If training virtually, groups could either go into breakout rooms or perhaps even use a conference call line to discuss, with one person assigned to fill out, let's say, a Google form that contains all of the indicators. How you handle breakouts is up to you and the technology available to you in your district. After the looks like, sounds like activity is complete, it's time for the gallery walk. This activity allows all participants to take notes on the indicators they did to review and complete the deep dive into the instruction domain. If training face to face, all posters would be displayed around the room for folks to read and make notes on their own rubric. Once you've completed the gallery walk, participants would get 2 different color dots, red dot, blue dot, or 2 different colored markers, red, blue, and mark the indicator that they feel may be most difficult and the indicator that will pose the least challenge to educators and evaluators in their districts. If training virtually, the gallery walk could be performed by all participants viewing one Google form that all groups populated during the looks like, sounds like activity. You have flexibility here to use whatever technology available to you to facilitate whole group review of the charts. The red dot, blue dot activity can be completed by participants typing the color and the indicator name in the chat box when they are back together in the main virtual room. At the end, as trainer, you should direct participants to assess which indicator has the most red or blue dots, which may inform professional development or additional evaluator or educator training in your district. The summary exercise in face-to-face training is to have participants return to their consensus map chart and put abbreviations from the instructional domain indicators in the consensus circle. This activity will demonstrate the connections between what they initially listed as elements of an effective lesson and the rubric. If training virtually, referring back to the consensus map activity depends on how it was executed. If done whole group, the presenter may just call aloud a few of the elements from the whole group consensus circle and have participants enter which indicator they feel aligns in the chat. Remember, the main goal here is to make the connection that what they've just reviewed in the rubric matches what they've defined as elements of good teaching at the beginning of the training. If training face to face, you can conduct the stand up, hands up pair activity using music to facilitate a quick debrief about the deep dive into the instruction domain indicators just completed. If training virtually, you may just ask for a few volunteers to share feedback on the 2 questions on this screen. You made it! This is the end of the overview for Day 1 Evaluator Training, slides 1 through 70.